Hi again then guys, and welcome to the first of a few reviews that we're going to be covering for the latest Forza 7 car pack, and car packs in fact, because of course there are a couple of free ones, the two Porsches in particular, one of them being this one, and the complete pack itself, which we're going to take a look at in the form of the McLaren 720S tomorrow on the channel. Now first of all, this car is a great one to offer in a free pack because it's such an iconic car. It's from a widely loved brand, it's a prototype race car, so of course people are going to love it. Now this is a much more old school prototype race car compared to many of the others in the game, so of course there are certain expectations combined with nostalgia that you're going to take into a car like this, because as much as you might love it from a historical perspective, from a design perspective, from the livery, whatever the case may be, you should also measure those expectations and that nostalgia because of its age. Because of course an older prototype, just like an older Grand Prix car, should not be as good as a newer one. Now I'm not saying it shouldn't be able to keep up with maybe something from 5 or 10 years later, for instance, something even like a Group C car as an example, but it shouldn't be able to beat those cars easily in most cases. Some cars will have one or two advantages in a certain way that's just so good that it can do that. Stuff like the Porsche 962 can actually compete with much newer prototypes because of the incredible straight line speed. The Chaparral 2J, for instance, in the Gran Turismo franchise, yes, it's old, but the tech was so advanced for its time that when it actually works in a game, it's a great car, and it can still compete with cars that are decades newer. So that can sometimes happen, but usually it doesn't. And a car that we reviewed a little while back from Forza 7 as well, the Jaguar XJR5, is a perfect example of that. It's a great old school prototype, but don't expect it to be able to beat the newer ones. Now as far as this car goes, it's commonly referred to or nicknamed the Pink Pig, and for those who maybe don't know why, or why the livery is this way, or what it's referring to, it's put simply a butcher's map of the different names of the cuts of a pig, or pork in other words. So it's actually pretty simple, but I think it's kind of a cool livery, because of course Porsches are often referred to as porkers, so it's appropriate to have that kind of livery on the car. Now that aside, it's strange that the 917 doesn't get more exposure as far as racing games go. Gran Turismo has never had it, this is the first time Porsche has ever had this car in Forza, so it's weird that a car this iconic in the racing world in general, let alone prototypes, would take this long to be included. And even then, it's not even one of the ultimate versions, say the 248 mph Longtail. It is, however, still an iconic car. So with that in mind, and also given that it's free, which discounts of course the 430,000 credit price, which incidentally is actually really good, even if you had to buy it in the game that would still be great, but what is it capable of? Because the category is 893 Pi, R category, and that is of course non-homologated, so it can change around a little bit. The one that I'm driving here is a little bit different due to the homologation that the game automatically does, but in that stock form, if you will, you're looking at 601 horsepower, which is pretty good. That's more, for instance, than the Jaguar that I mentioned earlier, which is a much newer car. This is from 1971, that's from, what was it, 1985, I think, something like that. So for a car that's over a decade older, that's pretty good. It's also putting out 415 pound-feet of torque, and those two specs in particular put together are actually pretty good for what is a naturally aspirated engine, and it weighs a very good 909 kilos, which is more than a great rival to any modern prototype. Now the horsepower per tonne is very healthy, 661, and the fact that the category isn't stupidly high does give you some leeway at least if it doesn't turn out to be quite as dominant as you might want it to be. Thankfully though, I will say, and you'll be happy to hear this if you are a fan of Porsche or the 917 specifically, you're not going to be disappointed. This is a good car. Now, I will say, it almost handles in a way that's a little bit too good for its age. It feels maybe a little bit inauthentic compared to what a car like this should be like. It should be raw, it should be a fire-breathing beast, but at the same time, I'm not going to say that it has perfect handling. So you don't need to get your hopes up too high that it's going to be OP. It may well still end up being, but it's most definitely a professional car. It's slippery at lower speeds, has a surprising amount of understeer at mid-range speeds, and the top-end speed, although good, you can see me in the video getting it up around 210, and as I said, I haven't tuned it at all. I haven't even lowered the downforce or lengthened the gearing or any of that, so it definitely has potential there. But again, it's not dominating compared to many of the other prototypes, and the fact that it is a much older one means that unfortunately it's in a similar kind of no man's land that the Jaguar XJR5 is, that it's a fantastic car in a vacuum, but it doesn't have many true of its age rivals to go up against, and that's kind of a shame, because there are plenty of them which it could go up against. Overall, my thoughts for this car are that I'm more than happy with it. I'm not a huge Porsche fan, but I do have a lot of love for the 917. It's a fantastic, iconic car, one of their most iconic lines of prototypes, with all of the different variations, from this one to the long tail to the insanely powerful Can-Am version, which is the most powerful Can-Am car of all time, of course. They are a very good basis to work from, and there was even a 6-wheeled version, which not many people know about, but look that one up on the net. It has a very interesting story. But overall, it's a car that I think if you are a fan of Porsche, of the 917, or just prototypes, you're going to like it. It looks good, it sounds good, the cockpit position is very nicely placed. The car itself has a very stable, wide, low stance to it, not surprising for a prototype. Top end speed is healthy, acceleration is good, and there's a lot of room to work with. That's one of the best things about these older cars. If you apply modern tuning methods to them, you'll often see a much bigger improvement to the handling in particular than if you applied those same things to a newer car, because they tend to be much better to begin with. So it's a good tuning base, it's a good prototype, it's a fantastic collector's piece, and of course the fact that it's free in the game is pretty awesome as well. So overall, that's it for this pick. Of course, as I said, stick around on the channel, because tomorrow and probably a couple of days on after that as well, we're going to be covering more of the cars in the newer packs, including the other free Porsche, and as I said, the McLaren, various others too, the KTM GT4 race car. And so, as I said, be sure to stick around on the channel, and of course we've also done tons of content for older Forza games as well. But that's it for this pick. I'll see you guys tomorrow, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.